Hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Kiara Simmons-Wood and I'm the Events and Marketing Executive at Charity Digital. I'm going to be your host for today's session and would like to give you all a very warm welcome. So today's session on how to write for social media will be delivered by Kirsty Marrons, copywriter and a regular writer for Charity Digital, as well as a Charity Comms trustee. And the session will cover how to find your why, the elements of good writing, how to inspire action, as well as sharing inclusivity and accessibility tips. Today's session is sponsored by the Public Interest Registry, also known as PIR, the non-profit organisation that manages the .org domain name. PIR helps charities build a safe and secure online presence through the .org domain and with the help from their .org Learning Centre, which provides resources on everything from website accessibility to cybersecurity. Now, just before handing over to Kirsty, I just want to share a few house rules and pointers for today's session. So the session is currently being recorded and will be uploaded to watch on demand within a week's time. The slides and other resources will also be made available to you by the end of today. Closed captions are also available, and I will shortly share in the chat how to enable these. And during the webinar, please ask lots of questions in the Q&A section for Kirsty to address at the end of her presentation. And feel free to share any other comments, experiences, or top tips in the chat section. I can see that everyone's currently introducing themselves, which is great. So yeah, keep up all of the sharing tips and stuff. If there's a particular question in the Q&A section that someone else has asked that you would like answered, you can also upvote these questions and I will be asking these to Kirsty first. Finally, if you encounter any sound or image issues, please let me know in the chat section and I'll do my very best to get the session back to normal as soon as possible. Without further ado, let me hand over to Kirsty.
Thanks, Kiara. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in today's session. So I know Kiara's already touched a bit of what we're going to cover, but just to run through it again, we will be covering defining your aims and objectives. I'm going to talk about creating content pillars, why that is important, then defining your why, the elements of good writing on social media, how to inspire people into action, and then ending on some accessibility and inclusivity tips. So just a little caveat, there is a lot to go through and obviously it is only 1 hour. So, if there is something that I haven't touched on or something that you would like more clarity on or more information, please do pop it in the Q&A and we will try and address it at the end. Also, if there's something in particular that you really want to know more about, it would be good to let Charity Digital know because that could potentially be another webinar topic. So starting with today's session, I want to start with defining your aims and objectives on social media. I appreciate this is about writing for social media, but I think, good copy is nothing if it doesn't really serve a purpose. So we really need to think about what are we trying to achieve. Every single social media post that we put out, what is the aim of that post? What is the objective? So a client that I worked with another consultant, Madeline Sugden, Single Homeless Project, we worked with them on a social media strategy a couple of years ago, and they have very kindly allowed me to share their social media objectives because I think it's good to give an example. So we used, of course, their charity organizational strategy because your social media objectives should always link back to what your charity is trying to achieve. And these were what we came up with. To position SHP as a knowledgeable, experienced and impactful organization, preventing homelessness and transforming lives of homeless people in London. Just a caveat that they are a London-only charity. The second one was to reframe homelessness, to challenge stereotypes and assumptions, especially through using client voices. To share content that builds an engaged digital supporter community and encourages people to take action. To share our knowledge, research, and insights to help drive changes in service design and systems change. to connect with other organizations to support stakeholder relations and partnership work in order to build a stronger voice, to use paid social media in a cost-effective way to reach and inspire new supporters and audiences. So having these very clear social media objectives helps when it comes, of course, to putting together your social media content. And speaking about content, it's really important to create content pillars. So content pillars are topics or themes. There are usually between 3 to 5 that are really specific to your charity. They can help you to articulate who you are and what you do. And they obviously then make planning content easier. They can also provide clarity to your audience on what you do and how you help. And having clear defined content pillars really helps when it comes to that internal pressure from other departments, when you can push back and say that this content isn't actually right for our channels or our audience. So again, SHP kindly allowed me to share this with you. So they have 4 very clear content pillars. So one is about illustrating homelessness in London. So the experience and the scale of homelessness in the city, including how this is different to the rest of the UK, first-hand storytelling and client voices, showing the complexity of homelessness and the causes, shown through a mixture of individual experiences and systemic issues, helpful information and tips. For example, when there is extreme weather, when it's very, very hot, or when it's really cold, how you can help people who are on the street, or how to help a friend at risk of homelessness, for example. The second content pillar is about demonstrating their work and impact, so showing what makes them different. There are obviously a lot of homelessness charities, so what's unique about SHP? And using data, stories, their expertise. They obviously have people in-house that are experts in different areas, sharing insights, outcomes, and opinions. The third pillar is building relationships and partnerships. This was very important in their strategy. So connecting with people and organizations with an interest in homelessness, prevention, and transforming lives, to build partnerships and/or to generate change together. Sharing and celebrating good practice, whether that's in London, particularly UK, or larger cities around the world. And then the last pillar is all about encouraging action. So what can people do? So, there will of course be content around people donating or signing up for fundraising events or challenges, partnerships, etc. Then those real world actions. So, how to help someone in really hot weather, maybe just talking to homeless people, how to start a conversation, social media action, building engagement, tapping into or building up a community, that kind of pride about being a Londoner and Londoners helping Londoners. And lastly, how do we influence stakeholders to create change? So hopefully that's helped you just to think a bit about how important it is when you are creating your social media posts, your content calendars, to really have clear social media objectives, and then creating those content pillars just to help you to plan that content. And also, I should say, it does help to help balance out your content, because you can see if you're maybe you have too many asks. For example, are the majority of your social media posts asking for money, asking people to sign up for fundraising? How many posts are actually just sharing case studies and client voices, or how many are just showing the impact of what your charity does? So moving on to defining your why. So if you've already seen Simon Sinek, it's really famous, his TED Talk. I'm not going to apologize because it's brilliant and, always worth listening to multiple times. If you've never heard this, then you're in for a treat. So I'm going to play it for you now. I'm not going to play the whole TED Talk, but I do recommend that you watch the whole TED Talk afterwards. I'm just going to play a short section for you.
About 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery. And this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operate in it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR.
So hopefully you could hear that okay. So what I love about that TED Talk is it's so relevant for charities. Of course, it's relevant to any sector, like Simon was saying, but I think for charities in particular, it is so important because why do we do what we do? People do know probably what we do, they might know how we do it, but do they really know why we do what we do? So some examples of a why could be, we believe in the potential of science to save lives, because no one should have no one, because there's no planet B, every childhood is worth fighting for. So that doesn't tell people what you do. It doesn't tell people how you do it. It explains why you do what you do. And it's really powerful. So what I'd like you to do when you get back to the office, probably in the office, after the webinar, and preferably if you could do this with other people in your organization, is to create your why. So using Simon's golden circle, start with writing down all of the whats that you do, then the hows, and then try to get to the why you do what you do. Now, if you already know your why for your charity, I would love it if you could pop it in the chat and share it with others, maybe to give them some inspiration or some, ideas of what a why should look like. So please pop it in the chat and also say which charity it is. So I'll give you a very quick example, just say a food bank example. So what does a food bank charity do? They provide emergency food and support to people in crisis. How do they do that? Well, people generously donate food in public and community places, such as maybe churches or schools and supermarkets. Then volunteers will put together food parcels to be distributed at the food banks. But why do they do what they do? Because it's not right that anybody should be left hungry or living in extreme poverty. So that's an example of the why they do what they do. So I really hope you are sharing in the chat any of your whys. I'd love to look through some of them now, but conscious of the time, but please do pop them in. And maybe if we have time at the end, we can pick a few out. So what are the elements of good writing for social media? To be honest, they are really the elements of good writing for probably any sort of channel. But one is that it's written for the audience. It's written for the channel. And by channel, we obviously mean that social media has lots of different platforms: Facebook, X, TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram are just some of the social media channels that your charities are probably using. And then lastly, what makes this interesting, useful, relevant, or meaningful for the person that will be looking at your content. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we need to use concise, clear language that's easy to understand. So written in plain English. You may or may not be aware, but the average adult literacy level in the UK is entry level 3, which is ages 9 to 11. So, keep that in mind when you're writing, that you should be aiming your writing to be understood by a 9 to an 11-year-old. And also remember that English might actually be a second language or even a third language for some of your supporters or your target audience. Try to ensure that your language is jargon-free, and also that you don't waste words. On particular social media channels, such as X, for example, you only have so many characters, so it's really important that they aren't, words that are unnecessary. Create instant impact. As we all know, social media is very, very noisy. X, for example, is all real time, so is Threads. Those first few words really need to grab attention. So think about that first sentence. How impactful can it be? Also think about maybe starting with a question to get somebody's attention, or to maybe use a first person quote, and also to use the active voice. So an example of the active voice is Adam ran the London Marathon for us and raised £4,000, not the London Marathon was run by Adam, who raised £4,000. Use power words. So this is particularly useful if we're trying to get people to take action. So, be persuasive, build impact, cause a reaction. So this tweet, I don't know what you call it now, this X post by Refugee Action is a really good example of using power words. So if you can't see it very well, it says, the abhorrent refugee ban bill has passed, becoming law. We want to reassure you that the fight is not over. We'll resist, campaign for repeal, support court challenges, and expose its harm. Together, we'll hold those in power accountable and dismantle all anti-refugee laws. So some of those power words in there are abhorrent, fight, resist, campaign, expose, hold accountable. Those are all power words. They're used to build emotion and to, cause a reaction. When you read that, you probably feel maybe angry, which is what the next one's about. Create emotion. What sort of emotion are you trying to create with your social media post? Are you trying to create joy or spark joy? Are you trying to create hope? Actually, do you want people to feel sad? Maybe you want them to feel angry. So that tweet by Refugee Action is a really good example of, you know, making people probably feel quite angry, but also giving them hope, because they're not going to stop fighting it. And with our help, you know, we can help them to get it to, you know, not pass. And then lastly, add a call to action, you know, so give people something to do and a reason to engage. This doesn't always mean it has to be a link. You know, it doesn't have to be a link to go read an article or to sign up to a petition, but it should give them a reason to engage. So, you know, this tweet again is a really good example of how, you know, that call to action is not necessarily there, but it is in terms of, it says, together we'll hold those in power accountable. So the charity is basically saying, we need your help, we need your support. And as you can see, that had, you know, 35 retweets, 104 likes. So people engaged with that tweet because it was important to them and it made them feel included. But it's not just about the words. So as we all know, to really stand out on social media, you need to have an image or a video. And of course, with some channels, you have to have one. Instagram, for example, you cannot post at all if you don't have an image or a video. Obviously on X and on Threads and on LinkedIn and even on Facebook, it is possible to post just copy, but it's not going to stand out on anybody's timelines or newsfeed. So think about, you know, how your image or video can actually bring your words to life. So there's a really good example, 2 of them, by WWF, and this is when Twitter rebranded to X. So it's really good that they were very topical and really reactive. The first one has been translated because it was actually originally WWF Germany who did this image, which is essentially the Twitter logos over the year from when it started in 2006. The different iterations of the bird, and then in 2023 an X, which also is a bit like extinction, and then it says protect our wildlife before it's too late. It's really, really clever. And then in the other post, it says Twitter's iconic bird isn't the only one disappearing. Today, 1 in 8 bird species are at risk of extinction, but we can save them and their habitats, benefiting people and nature across the globe. RT to spread the word. And that is actually a little video of different birds that are at risk of extinction. So it changed sort of the bird and the X, the bird and the X. And really, really clever and really powerful. Some other elements to include in your writing for social media is to think about space. So if you are a comms professional, you know, space is very important on your website, for example, and in emails, it helps to create, you know, make things scannable. And obviously it's much easier to read than to have one big block of text. So think about space and where you want to include that space. Include emoji, but use them sparingly. So a maximum of 3. So don't try and pack your social media posts with emoji. Use them sparingly, and also try not to use them in the middle of a sentence. It's not good for screen readers, so either put them at the beginning or at the end. Hashtags, this of course depends very much on the channel. For example, on Facebook, hashtags are really irrelevant. They don't really add anything, whereas on X, hashtags can be used as searchable topics or terms. And of course, if you are running an event that you have delegates at, for example, and you have a very specific hashtag that you want them to use, that obviously enables people to tweet. I don't know what the new terminology is to X. So forgive me for using the Twitter's old terminology, but, you know, would allow people to tweet with their own views and opinions or thoughts about what the speakers are talking about using that hashtag. And people can obviously interact with each other in that way. And then also links, you know, especially when we are talking about things that are quite complex and we only have so much space. And remember, people's attention spans are very short, including a link where they can go learn more about whatever you're talking about is really helpful. And all of these things can help good writing to stand out. So here's an example from Freedom from Torture, where they have put the kind of like a siren emoji in the front with breaking in caps. So again, that really stands out. It grabs your attention immediately. It's in capital letters. Breaking, we took the government to court on their plans to push back refugee boats. And we just found out we won in caps, exclamation mark. They backed down. And then the sort of celebrate emoji. And then there's a space. Today's victory shows that when we come together, we can, again in caps, beat this government's toxic anti-refugee agenda. So, you know, even if you just very quickly scan that, you can see already immediately what stands out is breaking, one, can, and all of those already, you know, it's good news. And then you'll probably read the rest to see exactly what it is that they won and what they can do going forward. So it sounds really easy, right? But we all know, and I've just spotted a typo in my slides, apologies for that. What about big sort of wordy reports or research papers that you may have to distill into, you know, a Facebook post? Lengthy case studies. So a charity that I work at, you know, we have lots of case studies, but they can sometimes, because it's a medical charity, they can sometimes be quite complex. And we have to be really careful about sort of how we distill their story down, because we need to do their story justice, but also we need to, you know, make sure that it's not a post that goes on and on and on and on. How do you distill a project into maybe a few words? And then it's not even just the words, right? What about appropriate images or photos or graphics? You may come from a charity where a domestic violence charity, for example, where you won't probably never get real photos of the people whose story you're telling. So, you know, are we going to use stock images? Could we create graphics? Could we use illustrations? All of that needs time to find. And then sometimes sign off can be really frustrating, and especially for reactive social media. So some probably quite topical examples at the moment are when Twitter rebranded to X. So that WWF, those examples, they would have had to be so quick to get that out. Barbie, the movie, there've been some great charity examples. Again, for some charities, if your sign-off process doesn't have a lot of red tape, that's great. For others, sometimes it has to go through layers. So you've already missed the mark by the time you actually post that sort of topical content. So a few tips, especially when it's something quite lengthy, is actually the first tip is relevant to any social media post, whether it's short or long form, is that the first sentence is the most important. And of course, that's because that's what will grab somebody straight away. Then you need to think about what are the key messages. So again, if you are maybe doing something like a research report, you know, what are the key messages in that report? Can you humanize it a bit? Can you pull out a quote? Think about what has the most impact. Remember to avoid difficult words or terminology or jargon that people will not understand. So remember the reading level or reading age 9 to 11, write in plain English. Also vary your sentence length. So, you know, mix in some really short, punchy sentences with slightly longer ones. Also try not to have a sentence that is more than 20 words. And then also don't forget about the space. So this is a good example from RNLI of a Facebook post. Or is this LinkedIn? No, apologies, it's LinkedIn. So it starts with a really, really punchy first sentence. Every other minute, someone in the world drowns. These are wasted lives, preventable deaths. So really short, punchy sentences, and they're quite shocking. So they grab your attention straight away. In 2019, a 4-year-old child, Robiel, drowned in Kalapara, Bangladesh. His parents explained what happened. We are daily laborers, we are fishermen. That day we were working in the river and Robiel followed us. And that time we didn't notice. The wave of the river took Robiel away, and when we got to him, it was too late. After finding Robiel, his parents took him to hospital, but sadly he couldn't be saved. Drowning is a silent epidemic that claims an estimated 235,000 lives every year, many of them children. But this leading killer isn't getting the global attention it deserves. That's why we are working with global leaders, public health organizations, and at-risk communities to help turn the tide. We want to make drowning prevention a priority worldwide and reduce this staggering loss of life. By raising awareness, conducting research, and testing interventions, we can make a difference together. Find out more. So that is a really powerful post, and there are lots of powerful words in there, those power words. It has a first-person quote. You know, the image as well is really powerful. The parents holding the photo of their child, they're looking straight at the camera. The varied sentence length, there are punchy sentences interspersed with longer sentences, and there's a call to action at the end. So how do we inspire people to take action? You know, when we want someone to make a donation or to sign a petition, maybe to register for a fundraising challenge, even just to sign up to receive our emails or our newsletter, you can use the think, feel, and do method. So think is associated with the left brain. It's about logical, orderly processing. And your goal is to have your audience agree with your key messages. Feel is the right brain. So it's really about heart, emotions, and passions. And it's really essential to tap into the emotional aspects of your story, you know, the human story. The do is the action that you want someone to take, or it could be about changing their perspective. Essentially, it's about what do you want the person who read your post to think or do differently after they read your copy. So an example, to be honest, is this one is a great example. I have 2 others, but the think part is, you know, every other minute someone in the world drowns. These are wasted lives, preventable deaths. And then the feel is the family story. It's, you know, very emotional, it's very sad. And then the do is, but we want to make that, we want to reduce this, you know, let's make a difference together, find out more. So a couple of other examples, again, is that WWF one that I have already talked through. So again, the think, you know, the Twitter's iconic bird isn't the only one disappearing, because actually 1 in 8 bird species are at risk of extinction. That is the feel. Like maybe you're quite shocked by that. Like, what emotion do you feel? Are you sad? Does it make you angry? And then the do is, but we can save them and their habitats, benefiting people and nature across the globe. In this case, the charity wanted people to retweet this to spread the message. They didn't necessarily want to link through to some other kind of action. So, you know, think about what action you are asking people to take. Another example is from the Trussell Trust. So this has a little video to go with it, which is Matt's story. So, you know, after being made redundant, Matt was left struggling to afford the essentials. He started receiving universal credit and housing benefit, but it didn't provide enough to cover the costs of food and bills. Universal credit should be there to support us all when we fall on tough times. But right now, it's not calculated based on what people need. Our research with the Joseph Rowntree Foundation shows us that the basic rate of universal credit is £35 less than what people need in order to afford the essentials. That's why we're calling on the UK government to ensure that the basic rate of universal credit at least covers our essentials, such as food and bills. Help us take action. So again, we've got the think, the fact that, if this has not happened to us or it's not our experience, that we think we'll be okay, there's universal credit, but actually it's not enough. And, what are they doing about it? Well, we can click that link and help them. And then the feel is, the story, which shares Matt's story. Obviously, there is some emotion there. Maybe you feel empathy, maybe you feel anger that the government isn't providing enough for people when they really need their help. Maybe you feel sad. What kind of emotion have they created? So I'm going to quick time check. I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes. You don't have to completely rewrite this, maybe make some notes. So this is a little exercise on think, feel, and do. So this is a very old tweet by a charity that I actually delivered some in-house copywriting training with, and I used one of their sort of social media posts as an example and an exercise. So how would you improve the copy to inspire and motivate people to make a donation? So essentially, a charity box was stolen from Cleveland Cafe on Lord Street, Southport on 2nd of May. The cafe is used as a hub to support veterans and their families in Sefton. If you'd like to donate to support our local SSAFA branch, please use the QR code TY, and then there's a link. So think about what language you would use, what images you might use. Would you change the images that they have used? And if so, what would you use? Would you maybe use a video instead? Can you explain more about the impact of what, that having that charity box stolen would mean for the charity? What emotions could you draw on? Do you maybe want people to feel angry about this? Do you want them to feel sad and therefore to donate? What information would you maybe include, or what would you leave out? How could the organization talk about impact, maybe more about what that money would have paid for? And how could the call to action be more compelling? So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes just to think about it, to make some notes, and just, think about how you would improve this tweet. Also, feel free to share what you've come up with in the chat. If you want to share it with other people, if you maybe want to point out, some of the things that would make this better, or, better call to action, pop it in the chat. Okay, I'm going to move on. Just conscious I also need to have time for questions. But we are almost at the end now. I'm going to talk about accessibility. So accessibility is really, really important. The World Health Organization estimates that 33% of the global population has a hearing or sight impairment. And if we think about social media, it's often very image or video based. And that means that, it has audio and visuals. So accessibility in social media is really crucial. You might actually, by not adding subtitles, for example, on your video, you could be excluding quite a large amount of your audience. So things to remember are subtitles or voiceovers on video. So there's an example there, the Refugee Council, you can clearly see in their video that they have subtitles on. And, you know, some platforms have made this easier for us. Instagram, for example, you can, in stories, you can enable the captions sticker. Of course, it's not perfect, because when you have an accent, for example, it might not always pick up on the correct words, but it is really important that we add subtitles or voiceovers to our videos. Also, alt text on images and GIFs. So this example from Shelter, when you can see on Twitter or X, when you can see that little alt in the bottom left-hand corner of the image, that means that they have written an alt description, and I've put it what it is. So when you click on it or hover, it brings it up, and it says damp problems that your landlord must fix. A red circle encircles the word must. So, you know, this gets read out to people who have screen readers. And if that image is really important to your copy, then you do need to provide image descriptions. And honestly, one of the best organizations to learn about accessibility tips on social media is RNIB and RNID. Have a look, they are especially over on Threads, because Threads launched without any accessibility alt descriptions, and they have actually campaigned and they now have them, and they are always offering really, really good tips and advice on how to make your social media more accessible. Another way to do that is camel case on hashtags. So that is when you capitalize the first letter of each word. If you do not do that, the screen reader, it just is like, it's nonsensical. So it's really important to add capitals. And also, even if you are not using a screen reader, it just makes it stand out much easier. So the Refugee Council one, I can instantly see that that hashtag says together with refugees, because they have capitalized the first letters. If they hadn't done that, that is quite a lot of letters for my brain to try and think what it was trying to say. So yes, always use camel case on hashtags. Try not to use any flashing images. And if for whatever reason you do have to, make sure that you have a warning. People with epilepsy, it can trigger them if there are flashing images in a video. Limit your emoji. Already we've said no more than 3. There's a really good example of, and don't just jump on trends. So on Threads at the moment, there is this trend to use lots of emoji or to repeat phrases that are applicable to their brand. And then all the brands kind of pile on. And, you know, for those of us who don't have any impairments, it's fine. But think about people who do, it is not accessible. So RNIB, you know, they have said repeated words or phrases are horrible to listen to for screen reader users and are really making this trend inaccessible. Say it loud, say it proud, but don't say it over and over. So, you know, just to be mindful of that, you know, feels fun to jump on these trends, but think about how accessible it is to your audience. So lastly, just to touch on inclusivity, when you make your content accessible, you are already making it inclusive. However, it doesn't just mean that your content is sort of physically accessible. Think about the language that you use, and is it visibly diverse? So, you know, all the images that you use, are they all, you know, white middle-aged people or families? You know, are you truly representing your audience? Are your emoji inclusive? So I know lots of charities make the decision that when there's an emoji of like hands, you know, when they're doing the point or point down or the fist pump or their faces, that they will be yellow. I have seen other charities use the skin tones, but then they use a range of them. So, you know, just make sure that you are looking at your emoji and if they are inclusive. Also, what pronouns are you using? You know, sometimes don't just assume a pronoun. And then, are you sharing diverse voices with your case studies? You know, are they diverse or are they all very, very similar? You know, you should be sharing different people's experiences and perspectives. So, in summary, before we move on to questions, writing good copy is a real skill and takes time. Start with the key messages. What is your copy about? What are you trying to achieve? What do you want your audience to think, feel, and do? What is going to motivate them to take action? Copy should generally be different on the different channels because sometimes your audience will be different on those channels. The formats are different on those channels. Some have character limits, others don't. Remember, people have very short attention spans, so it's really crucial to grab their attention in that first sentence. And then accessibility and inclusivity should never be an afterthought. So that is the end of the webinar. I hope it was useful. Hopefully there are lots of questions. Hopefully I can answer them. So I will just stop sharing.
That's great. Thank you so much for that presentation, Kirsty. I found it really
Sure.
interesting. And thank you to everyone who is interacting in the chat. It's great to see you all rewriting the social posts and putting into action all of Kirsty's tips. Now, we've had a few questions come in already, but if anyone has any other questions, feel free to add them in now, or even to upvote the existing questions, as I'll be addressing these with the most upvoted first. So the first question is someone asking, which charities do you think are great at copywriting on social media?
Great question. I mean, I think I shared quite a few examples in the presentation. So I do think Freedom from Torture does a great job on social media. They're really punchy. Their tone of voice is really good. I think they really know their audience as well. I also think Amnesty International does a really good job. RNLI, National Trust. Again, it's about knowing your audience. They know what they like, what they respond to. So yeah, those would probably be some that I would kind of pull out.
That's great, thank you. And the next question is from an anonymous attendee who said, thank you for this really informative webinar. Do you know of any online copywriting groups or courses I could join to keep on learning?
Great question. There are some groups on Facebook, and I think I have shared some with you, Chiara, to add into like the resources afterwards. Yeah. I would say one of my top tips when I first started in a comms role, if you have the budget, is to go on some paid copywriting training. So I actually did a 4-day copywriting course at a university in London. And there are universities that offer these 2-day, 4-day courses. And I think it's also really good to not be sector focused. It's good to get, you know, you do a whole range of different copywriting, and it can really bring out your sort of creativity. So I would recommend looking at some university courses. You can also do some, you know, charity specific courses. So Media Trust runs copywriting courses. They do either bespoke, meaning just for your organizations. You can bring, you know, a few of you, sometimes from fundraising teams, or they might do an open course, which means like this webinar, there are people from lots of different charities. And if I can toot my own horn, I also run training. So yeah, and then in terms of Facebook groups, there's Comms Creative. I think there is also a specific content one, which I can't quite remember the name of, but there are some groups that you could join, yeah.
That's great, thank you. And I have pasted in the chat 2 of the Facebook groups that you shared with me, and these will also all be available on the slides and resources page on the on-demand webinar page. So moving on to the next question from RV White, which has had 4 upvotes. They asked, in regards to accessibility on Instagram, would you suggest writing ID image description on the bottom of the post and then describing the image?
Really good question. Yes, probably. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I'm not an accessibility expert, so I would say go and have a look. Charity Comms has a accessibility guide which covers social media, and also RNIB. Yes, I'm sure it's RNIB. I've also shared this resource. They wrote a really good blog post for Charity Comms on social media accessibility, where they cover a whole range of things. I have a feeling it's probably covered in there.
That's great, thanks. I did post that link in the chat.
Right.
And we also 2 weeks ago, so our most recent webinar was with Etty Bailey King, who covered how to write, like how to use inclusive language. So I've also posted that in the chat.
Brilliant.
For everyone to catch up on. Thank you. The next question from an anonymous attendee who asked, should content be the same across all social media platforms, or can you do different ones on each? Asking because the audiences we target on LinkedIn and Facebook are different and might be interested in different things.
Yes, exactly. I think you've answered your own question. I did cover that in that last slide. Yes, I mean, of course, sometimes I find that often Facebook and Instagram has a similar audience in the charities that I've worked for. So we tend to sometimes use pretty similar copy. However, for LinkedIn, yes, it's a completely different audience. So therefore, the copy should be tailored to that audience. So if I can think of an example, so we recently, a charity that I'm working with, we posted about a little boy who got to be Peter Pan for the day and fly in the air. And it was a lovely, lovely story with amazing photos. But to make it more tailored to our LinkedIn audience, the charity actually has the copyright to Peter Pan. It was gifted by J.M. Barrie, and we brand licensed that. So we put that in with the other copy as well. So it was slightly different and more tailored to that audience. So that's how you can sort of tweak it a little bit.
That's great, thank you. And that's so sweet, the little boy getting to be Peter Pan for the day.
Lovely.
Yeah, no, that sounds honestly great. I might go look that up afterwards. So the next question is, we run an exclusive Facebook page for supporters who have chosen to complete a fundraising challenge with us. What we find is that generally engagement is low on the page, even though we post different questions, information, polls, images, videos, and graphics, etc. The main objective for us would be for supporters to post more themselves, and also for us to continue to build on that support post-event challenge. Do you have any ideas that might help us with this?
Can I clarify, is it a page or a group?
The question states page.
Okay, if it is a page, that's the issue already. Because it's really difficult to get, I'm sure all of you know this, to get engagement on Facebook pages, especially if it's something quite niche, like fundraising challenges. But by having a group, to my knowledge, Facebook prioritizes more. If you're in a group, they'll show you more of the group posts when you log on to your newsfeed. So people kind of remember that they're in a group, and they'll see something and they'll, want to kind of, I guess, engage with it. So yeah, I mean, if it's not a group, I'd recommend changing it to a group. And also, if it's not private, making it private, because if it's not private, people might feel that it's not a safe space for them to share. So that could be a couple of tips.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I hope that helped. It was from an anonymous attendee, so unfortunately we don't know. The next question is from Alicia, and she asked, Are the whys, hows, and whats supposed to mirror our organization's mission, vision, and approach?
I mean, not really in a way, because I guess a vision is what you're trying to achieve. I mean, it depends. Sometimes a vision is written like a why, so it could. A mission is really what you do. So the mission, yes, is sort of the what, but a mission and a vision is very concise, whereas the how and the what in that golden circle will be lots of stuff, because as a charity, you probably deliver tons of services, or, you have lots of things that you do, and you have lots of ways that you deliver that. So it's probably, yeah, lots and lots of things in the circle rather than a very clear, concise mission. But yeah, the vision could potentially be the why.
Great, thank you. The next question states, when writing copy, what would you recommend for small charities with a very small comms team, i.e. one person, and social media is just a small part of their job? Yeah, so sorry, just rereading that. What would you recommend for a small charity when they have very limited time, making writing different content for each channel very hard?
I would say if you're quite resource and time poor, it's all about priorities. So, you don't need to post every day on social media. Like, post if it's something. Having said that, you shouldn't post once a month either. You need a bit of a balance. But I guess my point is, spend time on posts that are really impactful. So, don't just post for the sake of it because you think you need to get something out, because that could actually be more damaging in terms of an algorithm. If people are not engaging with that one, then they're less likely to engage with the next post. So I think if you, just prioritize what is really impactful. So is that a case study? Is it, someone within your charity who could explain more about the work that they do and the impact that that makes, for example? So I would just say, try and prioritize, what are the posts more likely to get sort of engagement, rather than just thinking about, oh, we haven't posted today, we need to post something, and just, putting something out that maybe is not very interesting or relevant or meaningful or useful to your audience.
No, that makes a lot of sense, to really whittle it down to the most important things that you just really need to get that message across. Thank you. So Sophie asked, do you have any examples of good Facebook accounts to follow who do a good job with Facebook posts or specific tips to help grow on Facebook, as this is the platform we struggle with most?
I think everybody struggles with Facebook, so you're not alone. It's a very interesting one. I think for some charities, you need to maybe relook at Facebook and, have a look at, is it maybe still the right channel for you? Maybe it's better to put more effort into Instagram, for example. Obviously, if you do still want to stay on Facebook, I think some of the charities that do well are ones like Cruz Bereavement Care. I think that's a new name. They slightly rebranded. They often have, they ask their supporters to share their own tips and things like that. So giving people like a reason to get involved. Also, Great Ormond Street Hospital charity, there are lots of first-person case studies with really kind of emotive images. I think Marie Curie does a really good one as well. Again, asking people for their opinions or their thoughts or their tips. So, giving people a reason to engage is good examples of trying to get more engagement, and charities that are doing that.
Great, thank you. And just as we're running out of time, I'll just address the final question from Danielle, who asked, do you think call to actions with money should be on organic posts or purely paid?
I think it depends on the content of the post. So the thing with paid is that you don't necessarily, if you're targeting very specific audiences, you don't necessarily need kind of an emotive case study. If you're going to do it organically, then I think you do need that case study, that like reason, or someone who's taken part before, and like a photo of them and a great quote and something inspiring. So I think it's fine to add the call to action for that, but you have to kind of move somebody to then click that link. I think if you're literally just posting, like, I don't know, London Marathon ballot places are open, come and click this link and sign up for that. It's just not that interesting, because you've got to remember your whole audience on Facebook are not runners. What percentage of those people are runners? However, they will engage with the story. Why did a London Marathon runner run for you last year? Probably because they have a personal connection to your charity. So, that would make anybody read that post. And then for those who are compelled to want to do it, they will then click the link.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kirsty. And
Sure.
unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. So thank you once again, Kirsty, for joining us today. Thank you to everyone who attended. And last but not least, thank you to the Public Interest Registry for making today possible. And just as a quick shameless plug, and to thank PIR again, we recently filmed a video on how to fundraise during economic uncertainty. I am going to paste the link in the chat. So if you'd like to give it a quick view, it will also be on our slides and resources page for the on-demand webinar. If you could all share your feedback with us, that would be fantastic. I've pasted the link in the chat, and you'll also receive a prompt just after you leave this page. And finally, our next webinar is in 2 weeks' time, still from 1 to 2 p.m, on how to measure and report charitable impact. And just the last time I say this, I have pasted the link in the chat, but please feel free to explore all of our upcoming webinars at charitydigital.uk/webinars. And yeah, thank you once again, Kirsty.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.